If you're a subscriber, then you know in the last 2 weeks we've taken a look at the 2014 Kia Cadenza and the 2014 Chevy Impala, but what you might not know is we actually took a look at them at exactly the same time, and that's this video. So why are we taking a look at a Chevy Impala and a Kia Cadenza at the same time? Well, aside from my bad scheduling and accidentally scheduling them both for the same week at the same time, they're also the same price and they also swim in the same pond because Chevy is a solidly mass market brand, so is Kia. So we're not taking a look at a Buick LaCrosse, for instance, that has upmarket aspirations versus something like a Kia Cadenza that definitely does have upmarket aspirations but still has that mass market brand. Now, in terms of side style, I think I like the Impala better. I think that I dig this whole transformer angular thing going on here, but I also like the Kia Cadenza's simple, elegant lines. I think that I like the Impala's look better, but I think I might buy the Kia Cadenza because I think it might age just a little bit better than that angular front end on the Impala. One thing that I want to point out on the Impala is this really attractive back end here. They have this very attractive character line that goes up and over and gives it a very muscular haunch. Under the hood, it's all about V6 power and direct injection mojo. The Kia has a 3.3-liter direct injection V6 and the Chevy gets a 3.6-liter direct injection V6. Logically, the Chevy is the more powerful car at 305 horsepower and 262 pound-feet of torque, and the Kia is 293 horsepower and 255 pound-feet of torque. That really is borne out in our 0 to 60 testing. The Kia Cadenza took about a half second longer at 6.08 seconds to 60, while the Impala took 5.52 seconds to get to the same speed. Some of that has to do with the gearing in the 6-speed automatic transmissions. It's mated to both engines. GM uses, of course, a GM transmission, while Kia uses a Hyundai Kia transmission. But by the quarter mile, they were neck and neck because the Kia Cadenza is a little bit lighter than this 3,800-pound Chevy Impala. The Cadenza and the Impala are very evenly matched in pretty much every area, including fuel economy. The Cadenza scores 1928 with a combined score of 22, while the Impala scores 1929 with that same 22 mile per gallon combined score. Styling is very subjective, of course, but as a child of the 70s, I appreciate really square lines. I do like the way the Kia Cadenza looks, and I find these headlamps to be more attractive than the Chevy Impala's headlamps, but it's kind of a toss-up. I think the Kia is going to age a little bit better, but I think that the Impala is a little bit more attractive. GM is normally known as the king of bling, but Kia actually wins the bling award with more chrome on the back end of the Cadenza than the Impala over here. The Impala is also a little bit more discreet by hiding its exhaust tips under the rear bumper cover, while Kia integrates them in these large chrome ovals. The Impala does get a sporty rear spoiler that you won't find on the Cadenza. I think that the Impala's headlamps, although they are still both a little bit demure, are a little bit more exciting than the Cadenza's as well. Let's take a look at the Impala's interior before we dive right into the Cadenza. Over here we have a 2-level split multi-tone dashboard. It is quite an interesting look. It's very attractive, and it's something that Chevy has been doing in the Malibu and now in the Impala for a while now. Parts quality in the car is fairly high. We have soft touch doors, soft touch dashboard. In the Impala, an interesting touch is that even these lower portions of the dashboard are soft touch. They're not as soft as you would find in primary dashboards in some cars, but what they've done here is they've done a hard plastic piece and then they've covered it with a somewhat soft fabric and a very small foam. And then right here we have the hard plastic portions of the dash tucked quite far away from the driver and the passenger's hands. The only downside are these air vents right here. These are hard plastic and they are quite large. That hard plastic also surrounds the dual zone climate control in the Impala. Here we have a large 8-inch touchscreen infotainment system. This is not the same Chevy MyLink system that's used in the Chevy mid-sized cars and small SUVs. This is actually a sort of rebranded version of Cadillac's Q, which in my mind is a bad thing, but we'll go over that later. We do have a very handy feature here where the screen lifts up and then we have a storage cubby that is quite large. You can see I have an iPhone 5 in there. It's very large and it also powers it. It also locks with a valet code, so if you valet park your car, the valet can't get in there. Over here on the dashboard we have, in our particular model, the 4-inch display right there. There is an optional 7-inch LCD instrument cluster as well in the Impala. Zooming out, you can see we have a stitched effect cluster cover right there. And if we go over to this side corner, you can see what's going on with the Impala's dashboard. The dashboard is actually an injection molded dashboard that they then run over with a sewing machine. So these are not multiple pieces of anything. on the dashboard. They're really just one injection molded piece that is then stitched by a sewing machine to make it look like a stitched dashboard. It is a very attractive look in the Impala, and it was not terribly expensive for GM to do that, so I applaud them for taking the effort there, because that really dresses up the Impala's interior quite a bit. On the doors, all the door parts are soft touch, so even this black plastic portion here is a soft touch part, soft touch middles, soft touch lowers. The only hard plastics you'll find are very low on the door, like these plastic parts right here. Since we took a look at the Impala's interior first, hopping into the Cadenza, you'll notice two things. The first thing is that the Cadenza is styled much more traditionally. We have our center stack right here in a very traditional shape, very flat dashboard rather than that swooping, multi-layered dashboard that you find in the Impala. You'll also find a slightly better attention to detail on this interior and slightly nicer materials to some extent. So up here we have a faux suede headliner, which is very nice, something that you don't find in the Chevy Impala. You'll find just about as many hard plastics lower in the dash, soft touch uppers in the Cadenza versus the Impala. The most notable difference, however, are these air vents, really, which sounds silly to talk about, but these air vents are much more attractive than they are in the Impala because they're just finished better in the car. This is not something really exclusive to the Cadenza. The Chrysler 300 has much better air vents than the ones on the Impala as well. And I say that because the Impala's air vents are just very noticeable in their positioning in the dashboard. You won't find paddle shifters on the Impala's interior on the steering column. You will find a tilt telescoping steering column on both cars, electric available on both cars as well. The Cadenza sets its controls in the dashboard in this fairly believable fake wood if you take a look at that, whereas the Impala sets their controls in sort of a hard plastic leather imitation. Both have very decent cup holders. Shifters are about equal. On the Impala you get the ultra cool chrome strip that runs across the dashboard, which I'll show you a picture of now. And at night, that chrome strip lights up with a sort of blue-green color because there are lights embedded into that chrome plastic strip. Both the Impala and the Cadenza are easily able to accommodate large sodas, although the Impala's cup holders don't hide away, so they're always visible. Here we have our heated seats in the Impala, and in typical GM tradition, you can heat the back separately from the bottom cushion. So you can choose bottom cushion and back, or just to have your back heated. I do like that because sometimes I just want to have my back heated and not my butt.
The Impala scored 9 out of 10 points in our exclusive Trunk Comfort Index, but the Kia only scored 7 out of 10 points. The Kia's trunk is better furnished on the inside. Attention to detail is definitely higher in the materials and the trim quality used in the trunk. It's just not as spacious as the Impala's trunk. And if you notice from this angle, the opening on the Impala's trunk is also larger. The Impala also features those folding rear seats that allow you to put larger items in the Impala, and since the Impala is already a larger car, you can put some pretty big things inside the Impala from its trunk.
For my detailed take on each car, go ahead and click over to the link on the right side of your screen. We're just going to briefly go over some of the differences between the Impala and the Cadenza out on the road here in this video. The primary difference that you'll find between the Cadenza and the Impala is in performance. The Impala is a decent amount faster. Thanks to the gearing of the GM 6-speed automatic transmission, it's about half a second faster to 60, even though the Impala is a little bit heavier than this Cadenza we're in right now. By the time you hit the quarter mile, however, those numbers are about the same, so a lot of that's down to the gearing and the overall weight of each vehicle. Straight line performance in the Impala is better than the Cadenza as well by a full half second, and that's thanks to the fairly low gear ratio in first gear in the Impala. That's very important if you're stoplight racing your car, and not that I would ever recommend that you stoplight race any car, but if for some reason you needed to, the Impala is likely to beat the Cadenza every time. The Impala is about 200 pounds heavier than the Cadenza, and it has softer springs. That does take a toll in terms of absolute handling numbers out on the road. However, when it comes to feel, the Impala scores over the Cadenza because this front suspension is just a little bit better designed. The Impala, even though it's softer and even though it's heavier, feels more composed over uneven pavement, potholes, and in these sweeping turns and tight switchbacks on these winding mountain roads here in Northern California. The Impala just has a more confident feel to it, even though the absolute numbers aren't quite as good as the Cadenza. The steering in the Cadenza is fairly equal to the Impala in terms of accuracy, as well as in terms of front-wheel drive manners, and by that I mean torque steer, plowing in corners, a heavy feel when in corners under power, but the Impala gets a slight nod here, even though the Cadenza steering wheel is more attractive. Thanks to both cars having modern direct injection V6 engines, Fuel economy has been very similar between both cars, but averaging between 21 and 22 miles per gallon in both the Impala and the Cadenza during an approximate week and 500 miles on each car. Braking feel in the Cadenza and the Impala are fairly equal with one another. They both have fairly firm pedals, they both have decent fade resistance for large front-wheel drive cars, and they both have a little bit of rear-end lift under heavy braking. But that's to be expected with a large front-wheel drive car because the majority of the weight is, of course, under those front tires, so you expect the rear end to get a little bit light in hard braking. However, these cars don't get squirrely under heavy braking like you see in certain front-wheel drive cars. That's not happening in these two. Road and wind noise are very well controlled in the Cadenza and the Impala, but the Impala is just a tiny bit quieter. Now, Kia went for a very Lexus-like muted exhaust note in the Cadenza, so you don't really hear a whole lot of that 3.3 liter V6. But in this Impala, GM has gone for a slightly more pronounced V6 note. And I think that's a good thing because GM has a very good track record at providing good soundtracks from their V6s, and this 3.6 liter under the hood is no different. Kia makes pricing very easy. There are only two options to choose from on the Cadenza, comes only with one engine. Pricing starts at $35,900, tops out at $41,900. Pricing on the Impala is much more complicated. In typical GM fashion, there are an awful lot of options. There are 3 different engines to choose from, etc. The V6 Impala starts out at $30,760, tops out at $42,200. One thing to keep in mind versus one versus the other is that the Impala is slightly more expensive, it is slightly bigger, has a much bigger trunk than this Cadenza, but it doesn't have all those same creature comforts on the inside. I did find the front passenger seat more comfortable on the Impala than in the Cadenza, but overall, I think I'd rather drive the Cadenza than the Impala. The problem with head-to-head comparisons of cars in the auto industry is that it's very subjective and it's all down to personal opinion. And my personal opinion is that the Cadenza is the winner here and the Chevy Impala is the second place. I like the Cadenza's very comfortable driver's seat. I like the Napa trim. I like the way that it looks. It's nice and elegant. Has a nicely finished interior, nicely finished trunk, nicely finished pretty much everywhere. It's a little bit more elegant. I think it will age well. It's slightly cheaper, has a longer warranty than that Chevy as well. The Chevy, however, does have an incredibly large back seat, have an incredibly large trunk, and those rear seats fold. So if rear seat passenger comfort is more important to you than just solely driver comfort, then the Impala is definitely the winner. But for me, I don't really care about the rest of my passengers, so my money's on the Cadenza. Out on the road, the Impala and the Cadenza are very well matched with one another thanks to wearing essentially the same sized rubber. Now the Impala does have the better, more polished road manners than the Cadenza. I think that's just really about the amount of time that GM has spent working on their front-wheel drive platforms. Again, this shares the platform with the Cadillac XTS, which in my book is a very good thing. Even though if you take a look at that XTS video, I didn't care for the XTS all that much. Primarily my problem with the XTS was just its positioning as a Cadillac and its price had very little to do with the way it drives. I really like the way the XTS drives, I really like the way the Impala drives. GM pays an awful lot of attention to steering feel, steering effort, and precision in their steering on their front-wheel drive large car platforms, and that's something that Kia still needs to work on a little bit. In terms of absolute handling performance, the Kia does a little bit better, primarily thanks to its low curb weight. If you want to know more about the driving dynamics of these two cars, we're going to go ahead and pop a link here so you can see the full reviews on each one independently of one another.